was relentless in my search for internships. I was pumping out essays on topics like, what is your biggest challenge and how did you overcome it? On what interested me personally in hydrology. I was facing Skype interviews with business casual on top and pajamas on the bottom. And at the end of all of this hard work, I had 2 offers. One in Maryland at the National Institute for Standards and Technology, where I'd be helping with research on the spread of wildfires. I'd be using their facility that is essentially a large wind tunnel with giant flamethrowers, or I could come to Monterey and work at a general civil design firm. A lot of factors went into this decision, relative humidity in the summer being number 1. But seriously, a career in design interested me a lot more than a career in research, so Monterey was the clear choice. And I began making preparations to live in Monterey for the summer. I took to Craigslist to find housing and found a Miss student who was traveling that summer and was subletting his room. And the pictures looked nice enough, and the location on Larkin Street in downtown Monterey was desirable. And so on Memorial Day, I moved in. I met my new roommates, Lisa from Taiwan and Aipiri from Kyrgyzstan, and they promptly took off to go barbecue at a beach bonfire, and I was left to unpack my things, and then decided to go explore my new city. Unfortunately, no one told me that the old lock on our old house had been broken, and as I tried to lock the door and remove the key, I felt like I was in the movie The Sword and the Stone, but I would not be named King Arthur that day. So I called a locksmith, and my very first lesson in Monterey was that a locksmith at 6 p.m. on a holiday is very expensive. And I thought to myself, well, that was fun, and it can only get better from here. The second week on Larkin Street was also interesting. We had the biggest backyard on the block, and it was overgrown with these grasses all the way up to your chin. And our landlord called and said that she was sending in landscapers to cut it all down, and we'd have a usable backyard. And sure enough, they showed up and cut down all the grass, and the very next day, we had a number of new roommates. They were 4-legged roommates with a penchant for cheese. Mice moved in. Lots of mice. I can't blame them. I took away their home. And I will never forget laying in bed in my room directly under the attic, and I swear they had organized a soccer game. I heard a marble roll from one end all the way to the other, and the pitter-patter of mice feet chasing after it. So we called the landlord and said, look, this is not good. And she said, I'll handle it. And the next week, we found a big bag of mousetraps on our porch. Speaking of my room, turns out it used to be a porch, and they constructed a livable space without any insulation. It was the most expensive camping trip I've ever been on. And she had a history of doing this, turning different spaces into bedrooms. One night, a man knocked on our door, and we answered, and he said he'd been hired by the landlord to make a quote for some work. And we said, well, what kind of work? And he was measuring the living room. He said, well, she wants to turn this space into 2 new bedrooms. And I imagined a 6-bedroom house with no living room, full of mice, and I was never happier that I had only signed a 3-month lease. And the problems, unfortunately, didn't end there. Every day when I came home from work, I drove up the driveway and heard the scraping of the underside of my car against the concrete. And I called and I said, you know, this isn't really working. It's not really off-street parking. And she said, well, have you lowered your vehicle? I said, I have considered lowering my 2006 Honda Civic multiple times, but in the end, it just never seemed right. And she didn't really have a good a good solution for me. So I tried backing in, I tried putting some lumber down, creating some sort of ramp, I got some parking tickets, I walked 3 blocks from the permitted parking, and in the end I just grit my teeth every time I went up the driveway and hoped for the best. And my failure to deal with this issue head on culminated as I was driving home in a rainstorm, headed to urgent care where I would be diagnosed with strep throat. And I heard the scraping noise, but it didn't stop. It was constant, and something had become dislodged underneath my car. So I pull over. Using the shoelaces from my tennis shoes, I fastened this large piece of plastic that sits under your car and protects things back on. And I'm crying, and fever. But at the end, I think this is your fault. That summer on Larkin Street, I expected to learn a lot about grading and drainage, and I expected to learn what it was like to work a 40-hour work week. And I did. I learned all of those things, but the other lessons I took were much more valuable. And that's that life is full of small annoyances and large annoyances. And the only control that we have is how we react to them and the control of our perspective. So I learned you should face challenges head on. Don't procrastinate until they turn into something bigger. I learned that people are generally good and helpful. The guy I took my car to at the body shop thought the shoelaces were so funny. And then I reminded him so much of his daughter living alone on the East Coast that he did it all for free. And I made lifelong friends with Iperi and Lisa, and we still laugh about our mice experience. And I wouldn't trade that in for anything. So the lessons I learned weren't the ones I expected to learn, but they were really valuable anyways. Thank you.